On this episode of the Naturist Living Show, visible minorities in Naturism.
This episode of the Naturist Living Show is brought to you by Bare Oaks Family Naturist Park. At Bare Oaks, we offer traditional naturist values in a modern setting. Free your body, free your mind. www.bareoaks.ca.
Welcome to episode 19 of the Naturist Living Show. My name is Stéphane Deschaines. I am your host for this podcast, and I'm also the owner of Bare Oaks Family Naturist Park. I receive a lot of very positive comments, a lot of encouragement, a lot of emails, and I really do appreciate it. And I thought actually I would read a few that I've received over the last few months. I apologize. I can't read them all. There's actually that many. So please don't take any offense. I've just almost randomly selected a few. So Dan sent me an email in December after I launched the episode on gymnophobia. And he says, mixed feelings. And when I first read that, I thought, maybe this is one of the first negative comments I'm getting. But it's not. He says, it was so great to listen to the gymnophobia program today on my iPod. So great to hear balanced thoughts, mature observations, and an all-around sense of healthy reality came through at every part of the program. Which then inevitably made me sad, very sad. Why is Stéphane's thought paradigm so extremely rare, so unheard of, and even considered radically strange by most? I can only hope that this kind of common sense I heard today will catch on, will be the norm in the future. If I have any influence and luck, then maybe I will be part of that future as well. Thanks, Stéphane, and keep up the good work. And then John from the UK says, another great show. Living in the UK and having seen a couple of the items you mentioned, I think you've got your analysis of attitudes about right. By the way, could you send me the name of your theme tune, as I'd love to get the sheet music. Thanks, John. And sure I can, and I did, as a matter of fact, but I thought I'd go and give it a plug at this point because the song is called The Day We Met. It's by Mark Hodges, who very kindly gave me permission to use it as a theme song for the show when I first started. And if you go to the show notes on the website at naturistliving.bareoaks.ca, on the right-hand column, there is a link where you can go and get the music yourself. It says theme music, and there's a link there to Mark Hodges' song in the website. And then Rick tells me, I really appreciate your podcasts. I take your episodes with me on walks through the woods. During warmer weather, I can enjoy my hikes in the nude while I listen. Now, in winter, listening while bundled up. It keeps me warm, thinking of spring and the opportunity to be nude again in nature. Keep up the great work. Regards, Rick. And Ernie says, just wanted to drop a line to say thanks for the Naturist Living Show podcast. Each month, I look for the notice on my browser that a new show has been posted. I come from a very socially conservative background. My father was always interested in naturism, though. As a child, I remember him reading naturist magazines. He never got the nerve to go to a naturist venue. He would sit around the house nude, but when I came over, he would run and put on clothes, which always left me feeling that in his deepest self, he must think being nude around others is wrong. My journey to naturism is like so many others. My wife was very reluctant to go with me. When the day came that, in order to shut you up on the subject, she went, things changed fast. Your podcasts bring much of the early experience back and fills in so much of the history and ideals of naturism. So thanks again, Ernie. Dieter sent me an invitation to join a Yahoo group called the Reluctant Partner Community, or RPC. He says, as a group moderator, I found your most recent podcast about women in naturism particularly interesting, useful, and appropriate. Because of this, I'm going to recommend your show in that episode in particular to the group. That way, your fine, interesting podcast will experience a greater reach. Anyway, and he goes on to explain what RPC is, and it's mostly men, because generally he finds that it's the women that are most reluctant to join or try naturism, and that's what this is, like a support group. And I did join the group, and I was particularly flattered to read one account from Rick, and I won't read the whole thing because he tells the whole story about how basically his wife is coming around, and but in one of the paragraphs he says on his postings on the Reluctant Partner community, he says, Stefan's Naturist Living show is a huge help though. I had a captive audience on a recent trip. I copied episodes 13, Nudity in the Human Body, part 1 of 3, 14, Gymnophobia, part 2 of 3, 15, Nudity on British television, part 3 of 3, 17, Women and Naturism, and the recent episode 18, Sunshine and Vitamin D. I also have a couple of other shows I have found and played them, 13 and 17. We still have not spoken about them, but her initial comments were very good, and she even asked that I continue after a gas stop. I'm still looking forward to playing the others for her and talking about it. Anyway, and he goes on and talks about his discussions and efforts, and I think that's fantastic, but it's very satisfying to read that, because that is part of the reason that I'm doing this, is to help others get the word out. And it's not just about what I'm saying, but especially in the Women in Naturism episode, it's about what other women are saying who were initially reluctant and who have now discovered naturism and realize how fantastic it is. Today's episode actually comes out of an email that I received from George. George runs the Naturist Review, which is a blog, the naturistreview.blogspot.com. And he says, I'm George of the Naturist Review blog. I have a story suggestion for one of your show. And I wrote a piece about the lack of people of color in naturism, and he puts a link to that particular post. Maybe it's something you want to discuss on your show. Keep up the good work, George. And yeah, in fact, that was a very interesting topic. It's something that I've noticed. The lack of visible minorities at Bare Oaks is a concern. We don't discriminate. We welcome all people. I mean, it's about acceptance of self. That's what naturism is about. And about acceptance of others. And certainly religion, creed, color, gender, none of that, sexual preference, none of that should be a problem in naturism, but it is. It isn't at Bare Oaks, but we still have a lack of minorities. So I thought, let's do this show. And so I invited 2 people to join me. The first guest that I invited to participate, of course, and he accepted, was George from the Naturist Review. Obviously, he had some knowledge in the topic. But I also contacted André. He lives in the UK, a little further away, but through the magic of telecommunications, it doesn't really make much difference. He is the author of another blog called iNaked/iNudist, and it can be found at i-naked.tumblr, spelled TUMBLR.com. And he had also discussed the lack of visible minorities in some of his blogs. So I thought I'd invite him to participate as well. Of course, the links to both of their blogs will be on the show notes. So if you want to go and subscribe to their blog and read up, there's lots and lots of interesting articles on both their blogs. The website address, where you find all the links in the show notes, of course, is naturistliving.bareoaks.ca. Well, George, since you were the instigator of this podcast topic, why don't we start with you? Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Okay, well, I'm in California, America. I've been a naturist since maybe the early 90s. I've been a member of Elysium Fields, which is now closed, and also Glen Eden in, I believe, Corona, California. I started in naturism at Black's Beach and other naturist beaches. Actually, I saw an ad in a magazine for the Naturist Society, and I became a member and first, actually, I got their magazine, and then I became a member. So I have not been a naturist consistently, though. I go in and I go out, and I have, periods where I've been in naturism and then periods that I've not been a naturist.
And George, you also maintain a blog, right?
Oh yes, my blog, it's a very eclectic. I talk about things that are going on in the naturist community. I show naturist videos. Anything that is naturist, I try to include in my blog.
Great. And how about you, Andre? Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Right, where to begin? I find it's easy to write this down and talk about it. But anyway, okay, my name's Andre. I'm 25 years old, and I'm a naturist from the United Kingdom. I've been a naturist now for I say about 2, if not 3 years. And after about a year as a naturist, I was considered writing a blog called I Naked, I Knew This, and which has been quite successful online, to just tell others about how I enjoy naturism, and I hope others might be inspired from it, really. So I remember my first ever naturist event was a swimming club in a nearby city to where I live, and I must admit it was incredibly nervous going there, being by myself. And I think one of my biggest concerns at the time was actually the age gap. And one thing I noticed when I entered into the local swimming baths was I was actually the youngest person there. Luckily, there were a few other younger people, and the couples came in, and I befriended them, and, well, I've been enjoying naturism ever since, and I've been able to go to more landed clubs and other swims around the United Kingdom, and I've also been to a naturist bar also towards the south of England, and hopefully, if I get a chance this year, maybe even take part in the World Naked Bike Ride as well in Brighton.
So, the topic of this podcast, of course, is visible minorities in naturism. And because this is audio only, nobody can tell that any of us are a visible minority or not. And in fact, the only thing we can tell because it's audio is that you, Andre, are obviously not from North America by your accent, but you could still be part of a visible minority or not. And that's one of the great things, I guess, in some ways about this audio format. But both of you are, in fact, visible minorities. So why don't we start with you, Andre? Tell us about which visible minority you belong to.
Well, I think the textbook name for myself is Afro-Caribbean, or in other words, I'm a black individual, and my family origins are from Jamaica, and they came to United Kingdom, good grief, during the 1950s, and stayed ever since. Yes, you could say I'm a black British national.
And what about you, George?
Yes, I'm an Asian American naturist, which is actually pretty rare. When I've gone to a lot of clubs and stuff like that, I never see an Asian American naturist.
Never?
Maybe once a long time ago, but the clubs I've frequented and gone to, majority are Caucasians.
And what about for you, Andre? I assume that even in the UK, visible minorities are underrepresented in naturism as well.
Definitely, I'll be honest with you. If we go to my local naturist club in a neighbouring city, I think myself, and another individual are from ethnic minorities. Up to there's 3 actually. There's one lady from Japan, but yes, I am including minority.
George, you specifically mentioned Asian Americans as minorities, but do you see other minorities in naturist clubs in California?
I've seen Hispanic Americans and I've seen African Americans, but Asians are really not into naturism.
That's interesting. So, despite the fact you're very clearly American bred and raised, you think there is a cultural difference because you are an Asian American?
Yes, there's a sense of when you're Asian American that you have a sense of pride, that you don't bring shame to your family, you save face, and it's not something I talk about. It's not something I tell people. Um, in fact, I see a lot of these naturists on their blogs, and they have a nude picture of themselves. But that's something that I can never do. For one of the reasons is cultural, and the other reason is privacy.
And what about you, Andre? You were born and raised in the UK. You've always lived in the UK?
Yes, all my life, yes.
And so, would you say that you have a different cultural sense because you are a visible minority in the UK?
It's a hard one to say, really. I was brought up in quite a conservative Christian family, so for me, I think probably could be cultural particularly from my grandparents in terms of how they view the body, you say in a religious context and so forth from there. So I don't know. It's something I've been trying to answer for quite a while. I haven't got a real answer. I think it's something ingrained into us. I think it's, again, without sounding offensive, I think a lot of people in my culture consider Naturism to be a pastime only for a certain racial group. Say, in other words, it's a thing that only appeals to white people, whereas for black people it could be something completely different. So I'll be honest, I haven't got a real answer why, really. I don't know. Maybe it's fear of being the odd one out, or they, again, link Naturism to sex. I'll be honest, I just don't know.
So what you're saying, André, is that you believe that there are cultural differences in visible minorities, even if they were born and raised in the UK?
I believe so, yes. I think there's a belief. If I go off a slight tangent but away from nature, I believe there's a belief in our culture, and probably the same thing in North America there, where black people believe certain things can and can't be done by them, and probably vice versa. And I think Naturism comes as one of those things that just isn't done by black people, or should have. Isn't done or should have been done. I just don't know. So it's a weird one. I just know there's no real clear answer, and sometimes wonder if it's a case of, marketing. We don't see pictures of black naturists. We just assume that it isn't for them, really. I don't know. It's a weird one.
So, George, when you visit a naturist club, your naturist club or another naturist club, do you feel different?
Yes, I do. For one reason, actually for two reasons. One, that I'm a male, and on beaches, and in clubs, sometimes single males receive unwanted attention, and also that because I'm not Caucasian, I receive unwanted attention. There's been some clubs out here in California that I was made to feel less than comfortable.
You were made to feel less comfortable because you're Asian American?
I believe so. There's one major nudist club in the San Bernardino County of California that I visited, and the people were very standoffish, not very friendly. And when I asked the owner, how many minorities do you have at this club? And he goes, well, we don't have any minority members.
Wow, that's really unbelievable. I mean, this day and age, it sounds like they were almost proud of that fact.
Yeah, well, I just felt very creepy and just very unwanted. Nobody came up to me and said anything, but no one, it was just, I felt very creepy, unwanted, and which is kind of strange. Southern California is a very diverse community. There's all mixtures of all types of people from all over the world. But yet, when I go to these naturist clubs, I don't see that mixture that California has. In fact, some of these naturist clubs, they're out in the what I call white flight areas, way out in the boonies. It takes an hour to get there, and they're known for people who've kind of left the LA metropolitan area for these white flight areas.
What about you, Andre? Do you ever feel that you don't belong when you visit a club because you're the only visible minority there?
Well, I must admit, when I first went, I did feel like that at first. But how can I answer this question without sounding even a little bit offensive? I could say I'm used to it, really. It depends on whether it's going to, say, my local pub, go to the grocery store, the post office. For me, it's an everyday occurrence. So it didn't really bother me that much. I could tell really how I was and when I had my clothes on, and vice versa. But for me, it didn't really bother me, or it didn't really. I just took it with a pinch of salt, really. I kind of knew that minorities in Naturism is a very rare thing anyway, and you could argue I'm a bit of a pioneer. But for me, it was expected, so it wasn't really any real shock to me.
What about in the regular world, in the textile world? Do you guys experience any discrimination anymore as a visible minority? George, do you want to take that one first?
Not anymore, Stefan, because when I in my younger years, yes, because California has greatly changed. The areas I grew up in were mainly Caucasian, and now they're mainly Asian American or Hispanic American. So right now in Southern California, there's a great shift from, I would say, a monocultural or mono race to multiculturalism, meaning that you see people from all over the world. There's all kinds of different food. I can remember when sushi was a very extravagant food, and now you can get sushi anywhere. You can get sushi in the supermarket. You can get sushi anywhere. So things have greatly changed in Southern California.
It's kind of sad that naturism, which is supposed to be about acceptance of self and others and all that, is the place in California, well, at least in the clubs, where you're still finding discrimination. That's pretty backwards.
Yes, it's quite sad, especially if you really believe in the tenets of naturism that we're all the same, and especially, which is strange, that if we're all nude, we all have the same body parts. So essentially, naturism should bring out more of your humanity.
What about you, Andre, in the UK? Do you experience discrimination in the textile world?
Nothing directly. I would argue indirectly. I suppose many black people might experience this both in Canada and America, where you might be spoken slightly differently by maybe sales assistants in stores and little things. But luckily for myself, I got nothing major directly towards me. I hope it stays like that as well. So I must admit, I've been quite lucky to not really directly head-on experience any form of racial or prejudice against me. I hope it stays like that, really. But I'm pretty sure a lot of my friends and family can say otherwise, though, for themselves.
You've both discussed the fact that there are very few visible minorities in naturism in your blogs. What kind of reactions did you get to your postings in the blog, George?
Some were quite favorable. Some were actually quite angry, like, why are you even discussing this? I didn't even, post those comments to my blog. But in general, it was very favorable. But also there was some anecdotal, like people saying, hey, I don't know what you're talking about. I have minorities at my club. And then I had other minority readers write in and say, hey, I'm right with you. I've had that same experience that you've had. So I've had all kinds of comments, but most of the comments have been very favorable, and actually was a very good topic to raise.
How about you, Andre? You did have a discussion on your blog, I believe, about minorities in naturism, right?
I have briefly, yes. I had a post once called "Naturism is Colorblind," and I said that really, I haven't, in my own personal experience, I never have ever encountered any negative or I would say racist experience of naturism. If anything, it's even more accepting than than society in general. I find it a very positive experience, and I did try it in my blog post to say that is the case. It's it's welcoming, and if you can, do try it.
And what kind of reactions did you get to the post?
Well, I only got two responses, and they were from two other black natures based in America, actually, saying how wonderful my post was. And yes, basically, well, they didn't say much, actually. They just had a very good post and disagreed with me. So yes, I think black natures do exist. They just don't speak up, unfortunately.
George, are you fairly open about the fact you're a naturist? Do you tell your friends, your family outside of the Naturist Club?
No, I don't, for business reasons and for family reasons. And the only person I've really told is probably a girlfriend or two. I really don't. I envy those that can go to, they have a job and or what have you, and they can go ahead and say, hey, yeah, I'm a naturist and stuff like that. But if you have a job in a corporate atmosphere, bringing that up is not a good idea. And also, we have HR rules and stuff that could even be misconstrued as sexual harassment.
What about you, Andre?
Yes, I am, yes. Some of my family members do know, and a lot of my friends do as well, yes.
Well, the reason I'm asking is because I was curious whether when you tell people, textiles that is, who are of the same visible minority, do they have a different reaction than others?
From my experiences, well, no, not at all, really. Usually with textiles, it's usually the usual. Well, I get this. No matter where the ethnicity is, I always get the same kind of sniggers and laughs about it, and usually a bit surprised. I think, if anything, probably yes, surprised. So I think because of my background and my personality, I'm surprised that I'm actually appealed to naturism, have a particular name of my church background. So I get more surprised about being a Christian than do being black of textiles, really. So,
George, you talked about how you felt some clubs were a little backwards and didn't welcome visible minorities. Do you find any discrimination like that on the nude beaches around California?
Not really, because yeah, nude beaches is really not controlled. Like here in California, we have Santa Onofre, or we have Black's Beach. It's really not controlled like a club setting, meaning that there's no one saying you can come or you can't come. And then on nude beaches, people kind of tend to be by themselves. I've also seen a big change at nude beaches. People are less friendly. They kind of uh, couples can tend to group over here. Gays seem to congregate over here. So it's much more isolated there. People are kind of just there for their own thing and really don't encroach on other people or talk to other people.
So we all agree that there are less visible minorities in naturism than the general population. So the question is, why is that? I mean, we've talked about some cultural issues, we've talked about some discrimination. Is there one factor that's more important than the others? Are there other factors? Ultimately, why do you think there are less minorities in naturism?
That's a good question. There's many reasons. I would say there's a cultural stigma, like I'm Asian American, and even when I go to naturist parks, I feel a kind of sense of shame that maybe I'm doing something wrong, that I'll bring shame to my family, or that this is not how you're supposed to act. And also there just may be a difference in culture, meaning naturism started out in Germany and Western civilization, and that's at odds with somebody who does not come from that civilization, even though that my family's been here over 100 years.
Wow, so clearly your family has become very Americanized and it's still part of the culture of being Asian American. Do you think it's so? It's just part of the culture you're from, or do you think it's a general issue for all Asians?
I would say in Asia in general. In fact, it's a well-known fact that in Japan, if you show a nude image, you cannot even show the pubic area. That is it's okay to, like in pornography, to show a nude image, but the moment you show pubic hair, that causes a great stir.
But I've heard that in Japan they do have communal nude bathing, so there is some comfort with nudity in Japan.
I have been to Japan also, and that is true, but it's mostly, males in the male area and females in the females. It's contextual. You wouldn't see a nude beach per se in Japan with the whole families going. So it's in context. I've read those accounts in naturist books and in uh, other narratives, but it's not as pervasive as people think. There's a contextual. If you're going to take a bath, that's fine. But anything outside of that, it's shameful and uh, you know something to be ostracized.
Well, we all agree that there should be more visible minorities in naturism, and certainly at Bear Oaks, I'd love to see more. Um, of course, these cultural differences you're talking about make it very difficult, and it also becomes a bit of a chicken or the egg situation because if we have few visible minorities in naturism, that makes it seem like it's not for visible minorities or that visible minorities are not welcome. I mean, how do you market naturism to the visible minorities when you don't have a lot of them?
It's a very complex problem because, on one hand, if you do try and market to black or Asian people in terms of their pictures, some people might accuse you of tokenism, i.e., just putting pictures there for the sake of putting pictures there. Or on the flip side, it's hard because you could be accused of tokenism, or you could be accused of, say, don't know, just I don't know how. It's hard to explain. It's a hard. It is literally like the chicken and egg, and someone has to start somewhere. Just how and when. I think one way you could market it, if that's the correct word, naturism to black people, is having someone black actually saying about it. I think without sounding offensive, if you have someone white trying to market naturism to someone that's black, the black community or Asian community might be dubious of it. Whereas if someone black or Asian actually saying about naturism, they might be more likely to listen. It's the hard issue to try and navigate around without being offensive to anyone.
Yes, photos are actually a big problem, because there you really have a chicken and egg situation. At Barrocks, we have very few visible minorities, and I'd like to include them in the marketing literature. And if you look at our website, you'll find, if you look carefully, that there are 2 pictures with visible minorities in them, and that's it. And I had to dig long and hard. It was intentional that I picked those pictures. They weren't necessarily the best pictures. So now when I'm taking more photos, of course, because we don't have many visible minorities, it's hard to find people willing to be in the photos. It's hard enough to find people willing to be in photos and published in the general population of naturists, but to then limit yourself to visible minorities, which are underrepresented in the first place. You need the people to be willing to be in the pictures.
Absolutely. I would have no problem showing my nude body in photography because I don't find it extraordinary or, shameful. But, again, I'm worried about the cultural stigma from my family. And also I'm worried about, I've spoken this on my blog, that there's individuals out there that will take your picture and post it on their website or use it without without any consent. It kind of goes back to that old, I don't know if this is actually true, about, the explorer going into the deep, dark jungle, finding some indigenous people, and then he takes a picture of them. And the indigenous people get all angry and everything, saying, hey, you're taking my soul away from me, because, they think that taking a picture is taking their soul. And in some way, that is kind of like the modern equivalent of that.
So, gentlemen, what advice would you have for clubs who want to welcome more visible minorities and try to convince them to join naturism?
Well, first of all, these at the club level, some of these club managers or club owners, they have to be more open to minority concerns. They have to welcome visitors. Some of these club owners really just don't get it. They're stuck in a kind of 1950s mentality. And as you know, naturism is on the decline. So one of the things that these club owners they need to be more friendly and more open to non-Caucasian visitors.
Yes, I totally agree with that. And by the way, I don't fully agree that naturism is in decline. I think there's a lot of clubs that are in decline because of those old owners who are stuck in the 50s and 60s, and not just in their attitude towards minorities, but their attitude towards customer service and naturism and the world in general and how they run their business. There's a lot of problems with a lot of clubs, but you can see a lot of growth in naturism in the more modern clubs and resorts and the newer clubs and the nude cruises and some of the places that have been built in recent years. What about you, André? What would you suggest to a club? What would you recommend if they want to attract more visible minorities?
Ooh, that's a very hard question. I think like what you've done for yourself is by having pictures on your website. I think it's just I think no matter what, it's going to be the same tact of you have to be visible. It has to be visible. It needs to be clear that people of ethnic minorities are welcome, even though it already is. It needs to be more visible. Maybe not just in pictures, but possibly even in text. And I don't know. Maybe if the club has a mission statement, maybe include that people of ethnic minorities are welcome. Maybe mention it somewhere in the actual, literally in text. Mention it in the marketing. If the clubs have like club rules, maybe make it clear in the club rules that ethnic minorities are welcome. I think clubs have to be quite blatant about it, and not just blatant, but also persistent as well. Because it's not something that's going to cure in the same way as Naturism has tried for years to separate Naturism from sex and the other sex swingers. I think this is something that isn't going to be cleared up overnight. So Naturists have to be clubs, and the results have to be persistent, clear, and consistent about the message in the marketing, in the text, and even how to talk in general to people who might be interested in joining the club.
I do like the idea of having something in writing about the fact that everyone is welcome and that there's no discrimination. I mean, it's too bad we have to specify that we don't discriminate based on, race or gender or sexual preference and all that stuff. But perhaps if we put it in writing, it will clarify any doubts people have that because if they look at the marketing or the composition of current clubs, it certainly does look like we don't welcome minorities.
I think that's very valuable. It lets the person visiting right away know that this is what we believe and this is what we stand for. But also, I do believe in having standards and things like that. But having a policy up front, hey, this is what we believe in and this is who we are. That's a great idea.
Of course, even if we have all the marketing materials right and the right representation and the right message, we still have the problem of reaching the visible minorities in our marketing. How can we reach them?
I would have to say, maybe they should market themselves in that community. Actually, you really need kind of an ambassador who is already a naturist of that, who's not white, to go out there and try to get members. But essentially, the biggest thing I can say is just be welcoming, friendly, open, and you'll get those members. And as society changes, you'll start to see more minorities at naturist and nudist parks.
Yes, I certainly hope that society keeps changing and going in the right direction. I mean, I'd like to get to a point where all these visible differences that make visible minorities become so irrelevant that they're like eye color or hair color. And you can just say, hey, that's a really nice, skin color you've got, or just the way you might say you have a really nice eye color or nice hair or something like that. And we no longer think of them as different, just as parts that make us unique.
In some ways, America, I believe, in Canada and the United States, we've had great changes. Here in America, we have an African American president, but on some level, we have to. There's a lot that we need to improve upon.
Well, thank you very much, George and Andre. I really appreciate your time. Hopefully, this discussion that we've had will help everyone better understand visible minorities and how we can help them feel welcome in Naturism. Well, that's all for this episode of the Naturist Living Show. Thank you again for listening. You can find links to all of the items that I mentioned in the show on the show notes, which are found on the website, which is at naturistliving.bareoaks.ca. Just dots, not slashes. Please keep sending all your comments and your suggestions as well. I really do appreciate them, as you heard in this show. The show's email address is also naturistliving@bareoaks.ca. That's BARE naturist.ca. Join us again in about a month for the next episode of the Naturist Living Show.
This episode of the Naturist Living Show was brought to you by Bare Oaks Family Naturist Park. Traditional naturist values in a modern setting. Traditional values means that naturism is more than just taking your clothes off. It is a life philosophy with physical, psychological, environmental, social, and moral benefits. Bare Oaks Family Naturist Park strives to promote those naturist values in a modern setting that provides the amenities and services that our members and visitors expect. Free your body, free your mind. Learn more at www.bareoaks.ca.